Please welcome your host, Senior Director of Employee, Executive, and Thought Leadership Communications, Ashley Bellevue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like at this point in Click, instead of where are you going, it should be are we there yet? Which is the perfect theme for what we will be discussing today, which is the connected trip, which you've definitely heard us mention quite a few times over the last 2 days. If you saw Glenn yesterday, it was a big theme in his session around our long-term vision to build the connected trip. But what progress have we made over the last 2 years since we've launched it? How do we know if customers actually want it? And what does it look like in the future with the connected trip? Well, my three guests today will talk us through it. So let me go ahead and welcome to the stage. You have Rob Ransom, Molly, Matisse. Welcome, welcome. Have a seat. For all of you watching, we will have time for questions at the end, as you've seen in many of the main stage sessions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the app, and I will take them at the end. But let's go ahead and get started. First, let's introduce our panel. I won't introduce them myself, but I'll have them introduce. Starting with you, Rob.
Thanks, Ashley. It's great to be here. And so I'm Rob Ransom. I look after strategy and business development for Booking.com. I've been at Booking since 2014.
Lovely. Molly.
So I'm the Senior Director of User Experience. So we look after everything really that you can see and touch from our products and experiences, both on the partner and on the customer side. And I've been here about 2 years, so it's been an exciting time to work from home for the last 2 years. But it's been a really great time.
This is the first time you're meeting most of your colleagues in person.
Yeah, I've met quite a few people in person for the very first time.
Well, good to have you here. Matthias.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Matthias. I'm the Vice President for the Trips Business Unit, also with Booking for a little bit more than 2 years ago. What is the Trips Business Unit? This is the unit that actually encompasses everything but the stay. So all the core ingredients that we need to add to our accommodation business in order to deliver the connected trip. Flights, airport taxi, car rental, attractions, insurance business, and our packages business.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started, Rob. Let's start with painting the high-level picture of the connected trip. As I said earlier, this is something that we have been talking about for a little over 2 years now. Can you shed a little bit of light on where we stand now with the strategy?
Sure, and you're right. A connected trip is something we've been talking about and working on for a while. I would think, here's how I think about it, and a little bit how we got to the opportunity, which is, for those who've been in the industry for a while, we've made an enormous amount of progress as an industry, not only at Booking.com, but an industry of the things you can do online, the availability, the functionality, the ability to book, more than 28 million rooms across the globe. All of these things are amazing. But as we've thought about it in the last couple of years and our own experience and done research, there is so much more to do, right? And I'll give you an example. My family, we were booking just a simple ski trip not too long ago. I happen to have a family of 5, which is a number that is just difficult to do. So just putting together a trip that involved a flight, getting from the airport to a hotel, did the hotel fit, it took a lot of time to put all of these pieces together, and something that we've even done before and was really straightforward. So to me, it was an example of things are possible now, but it also raises the bar. And there's so much more we can do to make it seamless, make it easy, connect it together, and that's really the driver of the connected trip. So if you come back to the opportunity for us and why it's such a big theme and not a product or just a simple initiative, it's how do we take all of these things and connect them together in a way that's just easy for everyone when they're booking their travel and enjoying their trips. There's 2 pieces I would think about. One is, as Matthias mentioned, Booking for 2 decades was really about accommodations and the stay, right? But obviously, trips are much more about the stay. We think the stay is at the center of most trips, but you have to get there, you have to get home, you're going to do things while you're on your trip. And so part of that is just building those businesses of how do we facilitate all the different important elements of the trip. But the second piece is probably less visible and also harder. How do we use technology to connect these pieces together in a more seamless, easy-to-use way, whether that's in the booking and planning process, or as we've talked about examples of when you're in your trip and I want to do something or make a reservation or add an activity, or worst case, things go wrong, right? If something gets canceled or my plans change, and we're all coming off a couple of years where everything gets canceled, right? So this is real reality. How do you do that? How do you adjust and make it easy when those things happen? So that's really the connected trip in a nutshell. That's why it's a theme that's going to last for several years. It's not a product that you build and launch and then you're done. It's really driving the whole company.
Yeah. One of the things that you did mention is obviously you have a need for the connected trip. We believe that there's a need for a connected trip. We've been working towards it for, like you said, 2 years. But how do we know that customers actually want? I mean, it seems obvious, but I think customer behavior evolves quite a lot. And how do we think that they're looking for a one-stop shop, so to speak, for connected trip? Molly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good when we think something is obvious to check our assumptions and really understand the extent to which it is needed. And we see that customers, they need the elements of this trip. The question is when and how are they going to attach, as we say, like how are they going to connect the parts of their connected trip? We see a lot of expectations from customers that things will be, that the user experience will be very positive, right? We see Uber, Amazon, right? Kind of everything's at your fingertips. They're making suggestions, they're connecting things and anticipating your needs so that, you can really have that extremely positive user experience. And there are 3 elements to take into consideration. So things need to be useful. So it needs to provide you with information that can help you accomplish your task. It needs to be usable. You have to be able to do that. And I think we've been good at really presenting information that meets people's intents. And then it has to be desirable. So it has to be the thing that they're seeking, right? And when those 3 things come together, we have a really positive customer experience. And we know as we've run experiments on our platform and we've talked to folks and we've run surveys, that connecting your trip and making those elements of it more seamless is actually something that customers do really want. So.
Yeah, we've talked about this previously, and it's something about younger travelers in particular have a strong appetite for a connected trip. Can you talk a little more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we see that, I think folks like myself grew up with a different level of information access. So I remember when I wanted to go visit my dad when I was a kid, I had to call each airline and get the information if I didn't want to pay for a travel agent, which my mother never did. So I would have to call each one, write down which one was the best time, which one was the best price. And now there's just a flood of information. And while it's extremely positive, we see that for the younger folks, it's also a lot of decision making, right? So they're expecting things to be more discreet, more slightly selected and curated before they make their decision, because there is just a flood of information. And they're also bringing their expectations from the things that they use every day. So iPhones, other apps, other things set an expectation for the kind of experience that they will have on the app in your property, checking into your to get a rental car, whatever it is, they have those expectations that things are connected, right? Yep. They're not these individual experiences, but that they're known and that you can see the pieces.
Yeah, and they also expect the service to know them, right? They are digitally native to apps like Facebook and Instagram, who have built feeds tailored to them.
Yeah, and they often don't find that strange, right?
Right.
So like people who are not,
we find it creepy.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes creepy if it's not done right. But they do expect to be sharing their data or expectations in certain ways can provide them, they feel with benefit, right? I tell you who I am and what I want, and I will get a custom experience. And you'll know that I need a rental car when I land, or that I love Disney, so I get offered an attraction. There's all kinds of interesting things that I believe and we see that the younger customers are really looking for and expecting.
Yep. Before we go into what we have done over the last 2 years, I'm just curious if any of you have taken a connected trip. Is there any experience that you have with it? Molly?
I have.
I saw you, nodding.
I was like, yeah, so I recently took one of the first trips outside of the Netherlands. So I went to Portugal and I bought my flight and I got a hotel and I did rent a car as well. And I looked for an attraction, although I didn't end up booking one. And it was a real eye-opener to me for the opportunity because it was actually pretty seamless at parts. But there were a little frictions here and there that were not delightful, shall we say.
Sure.
And we're looking to improve those and make them delightful and really, it was a good overall positive experience.
Yeah, and just having all of your travel information in one place is a good start.
Yeah, it was
Just
very
not having to re-enter that, your payment information, all of that just takes friction away. It helps, and it'll get better and better, but that's a big leap forward, I think. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of leap forward, let's talk with you. Did you want to add on to the connected trip there, Matisse?
No, I just wanted to add one thing. And you mentioned, Molly, that in the past you needed to actually go airline after airline after airline to compare products, actually. I think there are a number of combinations that are offered, combinations between different verticals, where there is literally no information that you can actually find.
Right.
Yeah. So there are actually complete information gaps that we're trying to solve. One, for example, is if you arrive at an airport and you are picking up a car, you have no clue how much time you actually require from time of arrival until you can pick up the car, right? So this information is nowhere available. So these are actually use cases, where we think, okay, we can fill these information gaps.
I want to stay with you particularly on the progress we've made over the last 2 years. So we are starting to make this dream a reality. Can you share a little bit more about what we've been able to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, we achieved a ton. And Rob mentioned, this is not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year program. 2019, I understand, was the last live click event, and we talked about the connected trip. If we sit here in Click 2032, we will most probably still talk about the connected trip. So very short, what did we actually achieve during the last 2 years? Number one, we built an organizational model that is capable of delivering the connected trip. As you can imagine, delivering the connected trip needs engagement across the entire organization. So with our accommodation colleagues, with our central tech colleagues, with our fintech colleagues, then the trips business unit in order to connect all these things together. Second one is we invested in system capabilities, because ultimately we need to bring all these different reservation information into one central information repository. So we built the technical foundation, and now it's about getting all this data into the central data repository. We launched existing products across multiple verticals. One example is our Genius program, which has very good coverage on the accommodation side. We launched Genius in car rental. We launched Genius across airport taxi. We also focused very much on scaling our various verticals. 2 years ago, we had hardly a flights business. Now, flights is actually pretty big. We also started to offer an insurance business. We're scaling attractions. We also added around more than 100 cross-sell entry points. So what are cross-sell entry points? Where we actually advertise or promote other verticals, for example, in the accommodation funnel. So our customers go through the accommodation funnel, and at the end, we offer them an airport taxi or a car rental or an attraction. Or in the flights funnel, we offer our customers a hotel recommendation. And the last part where we started, and that's very early in the stage, started with experimentation. Experimentation in commercial offers, discounts on certain verticals, or actually in recommending the right product to the right customer at the right time.
Yeah, I would imagine payment is a pretty big part of building a connected trip. Have we made progress here as well?
Started to make progress, but that's actually a key focus area for this year, where we are working on multi-product checkout options so that we can combine multiple products in one basket, and it's actually one financial transaction for the customer.
So it sounds like it's great. It sounds like we're moving beyond the foundational bits. We're starting to actually scale new verticals. Have we learned anything from customer behavior since we started to scale these verticals? Are people booking it? Is it working?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, we've recently started a program to better understand customer satisfaction across all of the verticals and across all of the parts of the experience, because as you start adding in more complexity and also reducing complexity in some ways as well, you want to make sure you're doing it in the right way. So we've been surveying and understanding customers who are returning from accommodation-only trips, and also those who are returning from connected trips. So, and we see that actually there's a correlation between an increase in a likelihood to rebook for folks who are doing a connected trip. And particularly those who've had a positive supplier partner experience along the way, right? And so that's a really positive sign to us as we add more flights capabilities and we build that in. We're seeing a real positive trend in the effect on our customer experience.
Exactly. So it sounds like it's not, well, what you said there, if it is driving loyalty, or at least we're seeing the signals, that it could drive loyalty. It's also then good, not just for the customers or for Booking.com, but also for partners, right?
Absolutely.
Driving more visibility onto their products as well.
Yeah.
It's just to build on that a little bit for partners. I think, it's not just Booking building and expanding its business, right? It's not only are we expanding into new categories where we build new partner relationships, whether it's in car hire, rides, or flight airlines. But I'll use one example. Flights is obviously a huge part of most people's travel, whether it's leisure or business. But for accommodation partners, having a flights business is, we think, going to be hugely beneficial, right? The flights are research, I think, Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like 1/3 of customers prefer to buy their flight first when they're planning their trip, and then they move on to accommodation and other parts. Another third like to buy them together, and then maybe the last third buy the accommodation first or do something else. And so that really showed us that, despite all of the scale and success we have working with accommodation partners, there's a lot of travelers out there who aren't really considering Booking.com first because they're working on their flight. And so having that offer is going to, yes, it'll build a flight business, but we think it'll bring a lot of new customers to our accommodation partners as well. Yeah. So we're starting to see that, and the initial reaction to the business is very positive, of people coming in to a flight first and then adding the accommodation. So we're very excited about that.
Absolutely. I think one thing is clearly right, the connected trip actually drives additional volume, which is important for all our partners. In addition, I think we're also very focused in increasing the quality of booking that we deliver to our partners. And there we also see in first research that we actually get higher quality bookings through the connected trip. What does that mean? It means that we know, for example, if we have an accommodation booker that also adds an airport taxi or a car rental, the probability that that booking gets cancelled and the entire booking, including the accommodation part, is actually lower than if a customer only books accommodation. We also know that if an accommodation booker adds a car rental product, the car rental category tends to be higher than for a car rental only booker. So this is kind of how we create more value for our partners. And maybe if we talk about partners, now I think that's the value for our supply partners. Then obviously we also have a number of demand partners. Now most of our demand partners, especially the big ones, if we talk about airlines particularly, they try to develop their own connected trip. So they're kind of in the same game as we are. So an airline obviously doesn't look for an airline partner, but they need accommodation, they need airport transfers, they need flights, they need a car rental, they need attractions. So what we're trying to do is everything that we develop for the B2C business, so directly for our consumers, we ultimately want to replicate that in our partner, for our partner, demand partner customers as well. So ultimately, we want to build a one-stop shop for our demand partners. And then it's kind of almost a pick and choose. Yeah, I want to have accommodation, and I want to have car rental, or I want to have rides and attractions, and that will be possible in one partner center with one single integration. Again, sounds very good, but it's still a long way until we actually get there.
So you're already starting to look ahead, because that's where I wanted to take the conversation next. Great to hear all the progress that we've made over the last 2 years, and also the learnings that we have from customers based on what we've been able to provide. But what is next? Where are we headed, let's say, next year, 2 years?
One big part is still scaling some of the verticals. The key focus is, and I think, Rob, you expanded on that, is flights, attractions, and insurance. Most of the other verticals are already at a critical maturity level. And then it's really starting to work on recommendation. So we have this central information repository, as I said, we have all these different customer data points, and now is really to understand what product do I offer to that particular customer. We know, for example, the customer books a hotel in Nashville downtown, so obviously it's most probably better, and he arrives with a flight because the customer also booked the flight, so it's most probably better that I offer that particular customer an airport taxi rather than a car rental. So this is one of the examples that we're working on. So it's a lot of kind of learning and analyzing data and improving the offer.
Yeah, are we going to look, one of the questions that I've heard come up quite a bit, both with partners here, we know it's on the mind of many consumers, I know employees as well, is on sustainability. So what role does sustainability play as we build out the connected trip? Are we looking at making travel more sustainable through this? Anything that we have on the road there?
Yeah, absolutely. You can talk about it, but I'll talk about it too. Sustainability is, for those who may have heard, we launched a program to rate and accredit our accommodation, so they earn a travel sustainable badge for those who have these practices of our qualified framework. So that's very exciting. That gives customers the chance to make a more sustainable choice within the framework of wherever they're going and whatever they want to do. That's part of it, and Matthias's team is expanding that quickly into other categories beyond accommodations. I think it made sense. We started in accommodations. There's a lot to do there, but bring that to, so you can select ideally an electric car if that's something you want to do, or within flights. Flights is obviously, there's a technology challenge for truly sustainable flying, but even within flights, there are opportunities to choose particular flights, which is driven by the aircraft or other things like that are more sustainable than others. And so those choices are all coming, and we're working on that. Nice. So it's very much part of a connected, we're not going to call it the connected sustainable trip, but the goal is eventually that most of the trips have a sustainable element, if not all of the elements.
Nice. I know, so beyond sustainability being a focus for us as an organization, another one that you've heard us say many times over at Click 2022 is our mobile app. And I think yesterday Glenn said that we don't carry our desktop around, we carry our mobile app. I don't think we've ever carried our desktop around. But Molly, what role does our app play in the connected trip?
Yeah, it's if we think about the phases of the trip, we have a pre-trip phase, an in-trip phase, and a post-trip, obviously. And there's planning and experiencing that happen. And the thing that happens across the in-trip is planning, experiencing, and reflecting, right? This is the moment when everyone's both in the middle of what they're doing, looking for information about other things that they can do. How do they get there? What is available? All of those pieces. And the app is the center when you're traveling. I think we all experience it here, on our trip. We're on a trip right now. Yep. I'm keeping my phone with me everywhere. Where do I need to be? What's happening? There's research saying that if you're more than 15 feet away from your phone, you start to feel anxiety, right? Like there's actually a physical anxiety happens. So phones are really the center of the personality of of everything that you do. And so, the app is a wonderful opportunity for us to connect with what are the intents that people have. And we know that there are, I said this in the last session, but kind of 7 key decisions that folks need to make when they're on a trip. And all of those can be supported and represented in the app in ways through the connected trip, right? It's where to go, what to, when to go, who to go with, how to get there, what to eat, what to do, and where to stay.
I can't believe what to wear is not on there.
Well,
That's a different app.
yes.
Okay, if you can make the connected trip do that, I'm in.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So I think we've talked a lot about our app, as I said. One of the things that we have discussed is that we are the #1 most downloaded OTA app,
Yes.
3rd travel behind Google Maps and Uber, which we now know Uber's coming out with some additional things as of yesterday, but that's too hot for us to talk about now, I suppose. But beyond us having such good penetration when it comes to mobile app usage, what makes us think, because we're not the only one trying to build the connected trip. As I said, Uber's just announced yesterday. What makes us best positioned to deliver on this? I'm looking at you, Rob.
Yeah, I would say there's 2 broad things, and you're absolutely right that Booking.com is far from the first organization to try and say, look, we're going to sell travelers multiple parts of their trip,
Yep.
right? Others have been doing that for a long time. But there's 2 things. One is scale, right? And so to do the connected trip well, and that's not just to have multiple tabs on your site or multiple tiles on your app, but to really connect it and use technology the way we're talking about, you really benefit from scale. And scale comes in a couple of forms. That's having more partner relationships and more availability of different choices for guests than anyone else in the world. That's one. 2, having more customers than anyone else in the world, right? We have hundreds of millions of customers. And sometimes it feels like a burden, but it's actually a benefit that they tell us what they want, right? through word and action and feedback. And that leads to data, right? And so a lot of this will be driven by, frankly, algorithm and machine learning models. And for those of you who know something about that, just more data makes for better models and therefore better recommendations and better experiences for customers, better performance for partners. It all feeds on itself, and scale really matters in that situation. The second thing I would call out is brand and trust, right? And so one of the things we researched early on with the Connected Trip was that Booking.com really has the trust of our customers, right? They've experienced the service. They've experienced that that when they book something, it is what it says it was. They had a good experience. The partners provide good service, and they trust the partners. And so when we researched early on, it was a very high percentage of our customers that said, just basic questions. Would you ever consider buying a flight or other elements of a trip from Booking.com? And very high numbers of customers saying, yes, I would do that, right? And so that brand and that trust is really difficult to replicate. And so that's, that our scale and our trusted brand, I think, give us a great starting point. Now, we still got to do the work.
Yeah, sure.
Build the products, do the thing, but that's an advantage that I think others just can't replicate.
Yeah, I think the number is 85% of our customers said they would be open to connecting their trip.
Yeah, that's just a huge sign of
it's a very large number.
Positive feedback.
And it's something that we know that we are perceived as providing good value for money, and we can continue to do that through the aspects of the connected trip.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. I'm going to just quickly turn now to Q&A because I do see that we have quite a lot of questions coming on the app.
Great.
If that's okay. I'm just going to start to the top and work my way down. First one being, my sister actually asked me this question yesterday. Do you think Southwest will ever partner with Booking to aid in the connected trip? I think Southwest Airlines.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if we have the crystal ball. I will say, there's a different piece of the business, Booking for Business, that is for our business travelers, obviously, that Booking for Business,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. No, we already partnered with Southwest, and so their rates are available for the connected business trip, as we call it there. On the leisure side, I think, I'm not in a position to comment on Southwest's distribution strategy. We work with them. They're a good partner, a great partner, on demand partner, et cetera.
Yeah.
So a lot of ways to work together, and we'll see what changes in the future.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Is the connected trip synonymous with a package purchased on Booking.com, or is the vision to also connect things outside of Booking?
You looking at me again?
I mean, yeah?
That's a good question. I think well, first of all, I would say the connected trip is not the same as a package, right? A package has a little more traditional definition of just putting a couple of elements. Maybe there's an embedded discount in a single price. Now, I would say that is part of a connected trip, but what we've talked about here today is much broader, more flexible in terms of what gets connected, how it gets connected. It's more at the discretion of the, a little more dynamic packaging and the consumer to decide themselves what and when and how they want to connect things. So those are different. The second part of the question is interesting. Is it only going to be services that are kind of managed and directed by Booking, or is there third-party services? I would say, the focus for now, and as we've said, we've got lots to do on just connecting the services and the businesses that we're already in. But I certainly can see a model, and we build a platform and we architect our products to enable third parties that have interesting elements that, services or products that we either aren't, in a position to deliver or choose not to. It's just better. So I could definitely see that in the future. But right now, we've bitten off a lot, and we want to make sure we get through that on kind of the core elements, is what I would call it.
Question about COVID. Do we believe that COVID has had an impact or will have an impact on building the connected trip? So the pandemic, not the...
Well, I do see that there's more desire when we talk with customers to have the ability for flexibility, cancellation, so not wanting to cancel from 5 different vendors, things like that, and insurance for sure. All of these things have made people, I think, much more aware of who they're buying from, what are the connection points that they should be thinking about, and how do they kind of protect that opportunity. So I think it has changed how people are thinking about those trips, and I think it makes it in some ways more open to a connected trip, because you're not the idea of managing so many different separate entities becomes quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
I would say some nuances maybe on the product proposition change, but I think ultimately, right, the strategic direction didn't really change during the last 2 years. And again, I think there was some positive, but also some negatives maybe for us in delivering the connected trip. I think we really used these 2 years of low demand to invest a lot in foundation and infrastructure. On the other hand, you could say we lost 2 years in experimentation because low volumes, less transactions, makes it much more difficult actually to run experiments, especially if you try new things where you have low volumes, such as in new verticals. So that was obviously not really helpful. So I think, positive on one hand, but on the other hand also a little bit negative.
Yeah, and then the next question that I see here, given that travel is starting to open up and hopefully summer is not too far away. I know we just entered spring, but I'm looking ahead. Do we see any connected trip learnings for the summer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess here is my reaction. I think, we're anticipating that this will be an enormous summer for travel, right? And for obvious reasons that everyone's been thinking about. A lot of pent-up demand, a lot of maybe people have some budget that they haven't spent, an opportunity to just get out there and see the world and reconnect with their friends and colleagues. So that is there, and that's fundamental. And I think that's, the connected trip parts of that is just comes part and parcel with that, I would say. People are going to they need different elements of that, and how are we going to bring that forward? So it's really the focus on, can we just meet the demand, some very basic things that we all know in the industry. Do we have inventory in the time and place that people want it, and can we do that and connect it in useful ways? So I think it's much more to me about, can we meet their demand, And I think, though, we're in a position where customers will start to see, it's easier to add these things together. It's easier to connect the airport transfer in a way that I hadn't done before. Or I didn't used to buy trip insurance, but now I do, because the world is uncertain. And there's a lot of elements of it that I think will be there, but the big story is just going to be a lot of people traveling, which is great.
And I think in general, the whole pandemic changed one thing significantly in customer behavior. I think is a strong need for digitalization. So people are getting used or got used to deal more transactions in a digital way, and I think that's actually a requirement, a basic requirement for the future. So it will definitely accelerate some of the trends that we've already seen. That will be significantly accelerated. For example, you want to pick up a car and and a customer does not want to go to a counter and actually has physical interaction with an agent, right? The expectation is that everything is deskless and paperless.
Yeah. Well, hopefully then additionally just getting a lot of learnings from the volumes that we expect to see this summer from it. Final question that I see here is there a limitation of this connecting trip according to the destination? Or if it will be exclusive to cities with airports only?
So the connected trip is a pretty broad definition, right? It's not all of the elements. It's trying to say, how can we offer the best elements that are relevant to the type of trip that the person's wanting to take? So if I'm going somewhere and I'm not renting a car, and I want to be out in nature, there may be some ways to connect that trip. Using other suppliers and offerings that we have that don't have to be flights and don't have to be car rentals. So we're keeping it fairly open because we also see customer behavior varies a lot from trip type to trip type and location to location, right? Depending on what people are trying to accomplish.
And I think this relates to another discussion we've had. If it doesn't have an airport, there's the train discussion, both from a sustainability perspective. Yep. But we are looking at some point to do trains or not?
It's on the roadmap.
Yeah.
It's not a top priority. The focus right now is really getting better coverage on airport transfer. But ultimately, I think sooner or later we're actually going to look at international, long haul train connections. Yes.
Do we have public transport on now?
We do have public transfer, but again, that is more focused on airports to city transfer,
not within.
as an alternative to the classical airport taxi. Yeah.
Understood. Well, that is all that I have on the questions here. And that, I think, wraps us up for this session. Thanks to everyone for tuning in here live and everyone who is tuning in digitally. It's been a great session, so thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Ashley.